Every year, Africans living abroad send nearly $100 billion back home, a lifeline that now exceeds the combined GDP of nations such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, Niger, Mozambique, and Madagascar. But these remittances are more than personal gestures. They've become one of the continent's most reliable sources of foreign exchange and a stabilizing pillar for entire economies. From funding school fees and healthcare to supporting small businesses, diaspora capital now supports the livelihoods of millions. Yet, many argue that the potential goes far beyond household consumption. As digital infrastructure deepens and financial platforms evolve, there's a growing push to channel diaspora wealth into productive investments such as infrastructure, real estate, and technology ventures that can drive long-term growth. One entrepreneur helping to bridge that gap is Joe Kinvey, CEO of Borderless, a platform connecting African diaspora collectives with investment opportunities back home. Before founding Borderless, he co-founded Oak, where he mobilized capital into high-growth technology startups across Africa. Kinvey joins this week's Inspired Afrique segment on Equity Merchants to unpack where he sees the greatest investment opportunities, how new financial tools can make cross-border investing more efficient, and what it will take to transform Africa's diaspora from a remittance engine into a global investment powerhouse. The African diaspora raised or sent back money, much more money than we got in aid last year. And it has sort of sparked these conversations around how we need to start thinking of how to harness some of that money for investments back home, especially in the light of receding aid and even like for those of us in the startup space where there's lower funding or less funding. So what's your take on that? How important is this conversation? How important is it for us to start channeling funds from the diaspora back to economic value?
Yeah, so I think we need to start with looking at the actual number. Right? It's 100 billion that was sent to the continent in 2023, slightly higher in 2024. When you dig into the data, that number is split into two ways. So you have about 75% of that money that went towards what we call consumption remittance. So people need to eat, pay school fees, medical bills, etc. And then you have the remaining 25% that actually went towards investment. And these investments are things like somebody, investing in their, cousin's small business, somebody building a house, somebody investing in bonds in Nigeria, for example. So the thing is already happening. People are already investing home. The thing is, the data is not very clear. Somehow, people are not paying attention to the smaller detail. The first part, the 75 billion that went towards consumption, cannot be channeled towards investments. If that happens, people will go hungry. That's not good for anyone.
Okay.
However, we already see that there is 25%, which is 25 billion that already goes to the continent, which is great. Wow. But through our research and the work that we've been doing over the past 5 years cumulatively, is we noticed that the diaspora, the African diaspora in particular, has even more money. The number is 30 billion. And this 30 billion is not invested, it's not in the S&P 500, it's just sitting in the bank accounts. I'm going to use the term gathering dust. Can we funnel or help the diaspora funnel that money towards productive investments that's on the continent? And when this extra 30 billion start generating interest, for context, 10% of that is 3 billion, right? 20% 6, and then you can do the number. If we can help them invest that, then they can now use those returns to do more things. So what we're saying is, if you can make money from investing the money that you have sitting in the bank account, you don't have to go out of pocket to send money back home anymore. So if we can help channel that extra 30 billion, that capital becomes productive, that money goes to the continent, it goes to businesses that hire people, that create jobs, provide returns for people who are back outside of the continent, and now you have that 30 billion actually growing. So I think, I want to provide a bit of context around the data, and sadly, it seems like when people leave Africa, it's like they've made it, meaning that there hasn't been a lot of investment in terms of research in the diaspora, and that's the work that we've been doing over the past 5 years to understand the diaspora. Because I'm a diasporan, I am Togolese who lived in Europe for the past 20 years, and I've seen my mom go through her struggles and challenges, and also I have a lot of friends, peers, colleagues who are also diasporan, so I've been privileged to be a diasporan and work with so many diasporans to really, really understand us and figure out how we can contribute to the continent.
Yeah, so you make a good point there in the sense that the diaspora is already investing in Africa. So, I mean, it's something that a lot of people are probably you're conversant with or familiar with. You know a relative who has lived abroad for most of their life and they're building back at home, or they own a couple of businesses back at home. So you're right in saying that they are investing already. But we also have a scenario where some of them have invested, and this is like very common in Nigeria. I don't know if it's common like in Togo, but you have people who, they've been funneling money back home for a building project, for example, and then after five, 6 years or something, you come back home and you try to check on that project and realize that nothing was happening. So the person who you were sending the money to for this purpose just used the money for whatever it was that they chose. And a lot have been burned, and they've sort of decided not to invest except they are directly supervising those investments. How do we help people like this who have been burned and who have probably decided it's just not worth it except I'm on ground? How do we help people like this to make more investments? What kind of structures do we need to build in order to have them build or make investments back home?
So many of us, the African diaspora, want to go back home. And I keep saying this. We're just not ready yet. That's why you see a lot of people wanting to invest back. And the sad part is we don't have the time to go back on the ground and supervise. Like, if you want to supervise a building project that's going to take you 9 to 12 months, that means that you're leaving everything that you're doing back in Europe or in America. And you can't really do it because it's like a double-edged sword. If you go to that side, then you can't earn money to keep building. And so many people have been burnt. It's a story. My mom has gone through it. My family has gone through it. I've spoken to so many strangers. The one that really broke my heart recently is a gentleman who lived in Germany for years, and he sent 200,000 euro back, and the house wasn't built. Like, you and I know what you can do with 200,000 euros. That's a lot of money. That's like nearly $220,000, and the FX today, that's like nearly 300 million naira. It's crazy amount of money. What we're seeing is there are a lot of companies that are actually helping people get projects from start to completion on the ground. This week, I speak to so many great entrepreneurs in Africa, but also outside, who are helping people complete projects back home. The one that I spoke to this week too, actually, a company called Bankole, and it's a gentleman who now lives between Nigeria and Canada. And what he's doing is build this tech that allows people who are building back to essentially supervise the project from start to finish. It's excellent. I am so excited to do work with them because they are solving problems for us, because we have people pull money together and invest in projects. And many times I'm dialing in from London. Yes, I spend time in Africa, I spend time on the continent, but I can't spend all my time supervising projects or doing so many things. So like, there are companies like that can help you, especially when it comes to real estate. The second company that I spoke to this week, it's founded by a guy called Joe Orji, and it's called Trust Crow. So Trust Crow allows you to essentially find pre-vetted real estate to buy, pre-vetted land to buy, and they are signing an agreement with the authorities to essentially enable the diaspora to find these pre-vetted properties, assets before they can invest. So these are like two great companies, and there are two of many companies that are already building solutions to really help rebuild the trust that has been broken over the past couple of years. What we are doing, at least at Borderless, is we're helping people put collectives together, pull money, and acquire assets. And the ones that we've done so far is real estate. Before we buy any assets, we do a ton of DD. What that means is, first, you're not putting a lot of capital at play, especially if you haven't invested in real estate in Africa before. But also, you are buying something that's pre-vetted. We've seen it, we send people over, and you start earning rental income. It's not a property that you own by yourself, but you own it with a group of people. What that helps you do is start earning money on your money immediately, but also you get to learn about real estate in Africa. The challenge is a lot of people don't really understand how real estate works in Africa. Africa is big, 54 countries, so many languages, so many cities, and a lot of people, especially those who are not African, want to go there, or they're like, their parents are African, or they're African American, or whatever the case is. They want to go in there and jump it without really studying the landscape. That never really goes so well. So what we're enabling people to do is get a first taste of the market, and if you're putting in 5 or 10,000, that's better than putting in 200,000. So when you learn the landscape, you've gone a couple of times, then you build those relationships with the likes of Trustcro or Bankole, and now from Washington D.C. or LA or San Francisco, you cannot build the house of your dreams, and when the time is right, you can go back home.
Awesome. All right. So let's look at something really important that you raised, which is the fact that Africans do want to move, or Africans in the diaspora want to move back home. So I don't know if you saw this video that was making the rounds on Twitter. I think that was last week. And it was just a lady talking about how her parents had invested a whole lot of money in their hometown, and they didn't invest that much money in their kids. So it was sort of a knock on the older generation who did that. And there's this worry, especially with sort of instability in some African governments, that we could lose a generation of Africans who they'd move and then cut ties with home. How much of a problem is that? You're a diasporan. You've lived outside the continent for most of your life now. So how much of a problem do you think that is? And is that something we should be worried about?
No, it's not something we should be worried about. Africa actually has the fastest growing population. So the more people that leave, that means that more jobs are created, first thing first. And when people don't come back,
okay,
there are a lot of people doing things on the ground. We need them. They have the resources, they have the knowledge. We need them to come back. And what I've seen maybe over the past 2-3 years is when Tinubu came into power in Nigeria, he actually managed to hire a lot of people who left. So Bosun, that we all know very well, wasn't living in Nigeria. Well, he was, but he spent a lot of time in Europe. He's now back. You have a lady called Jane who also went back. I saw an interview recently by a lady who is now head of the Nigerian Postal Service. She has a very American accent. That means that she's also coming back. So what we're seeing is people that we actually grew up with, people that we know outside are the future leaders. So there's change coming. And if you want a Nigeria or Togo that you want to live in, we have to go back. Policies are not made by, AI. Policies are made by people. So if you want to see real change, yes, you can cut ties all you want, but change can happen within a generation. And many of us have to play part in that change. We can't just sit back and somebody's going to solve the problem for us. So if we want to see change, if we're complaining about things are not working, the government is not doing the right thing. Governments are people. And a lot of people that have gone abroad are going back to actually make real change. And I was in Paris recently, and I spent time with the guys from Itana. And when you look at Itana is the company that allows people to go back and set up companies, etc. It's a digital free trade zone. As part of that delegation, there's so many people that I know I've worked with that have gone back now to do work. We might not see immediately, and that's how change works. Change doesn't happen drastically, but it's over time that you see it. And it's people that we know, people that we went to school with, outside that are going back. So if you don't want to go back, it's completely fine. But if you want to see an Africa that resembles something that you're used to, a place that you want to live, maybe it's time to start thinking about that.
Yeah, really important there. So we are pretty familiar with real estate investments. We are pretty familiar with technology investments from the diaspora. But beyond these two areas, what other areas are you seeing the African diaspora invest in? Yeah, I think there's also agriculture to a lesser extent. But beyond these three areas, what other areas are you seeing the diaspora investing?
I think when people are thinking about investing in Africa, they need to learn the behavior of Africans.
Okay.
The average African spends 90% of their wallet, or how much money they have, on four things: housing, food, agriculture, energy, and logistics. Those are the four things that money is going into. So if you look at the sectors that are close to these four things, then maybe that's where you should be investing. For example, I'm seeing a lot of money market funds. I'm seeing a lot of bonds that are being issued by the likes of Dangote and by a lot of companies in Nigeria. And I think people need to pay attention to this. We also have like stock markets across the continent. And I heard a stat yesterday, I haven't verified it, but the Ghanaian stock market overperformed the American one 2x last year. I haven't double checked it. But like all this money is now going into infrastructure that will enable logistics to move better. That means that food is moving better. That means we can build more houses. I think more and more people should be investing in African bonds and African stocks. Before you do that, you need to really understand what happens. So when you invest in bonds issued by a country, what happens is the country takes that money, invests it into projects to make the place better, and pay you returns. That money becomes productive. And now you're assuming that the government is using the money the right way that it's supposed to use it, right? And when you have the right people with the right ethics, the money will be spent well. When you invest in your country's GDP grows. That means that the place gets better. That means people's lives are better. That means better roads. That means better hospitals. And the country gets better. And you also make money. And the returns are actually better than what you'd get right now, at least in the US. I think the T-bills are 5.5%. Like when you look at the T-bills in Nigeria, it's hovering around 20%. Yes, inflation and FX volatility, but the Naira hasn't actually moved much this year. I think it's like hovered between 1,500 and 1,600, and we're already halfway throughout the year. So when you look at the data, like really and truly, investing in Africa can be profitable, but a lot of people don't have access to that data. They don't know how to invest in bonds, and there's actually a lot of companies that are doing this, like the likes of Bamboo, the likes of Get Equity. I'm talking specifically about Nigeria here. And I spoke to a company yesterday called MyStocks.Africa, and they are enabling anybody to buy African stocks throughout like 5 major regions. We need to have access to more information so that we can make informed decisions. And you need to start using the right tools, the technology where you can invest. Now, investment into Africa can be expensive, but when you're using the right fintechs and the right platforms, you can invest at a much lower cost, but more importantly, get your money back. And I think that's what we really want to achieve at Borderless. We want to enable people to invest, and whatever we promise we're going to deliver, we'll deliver. And if we deliver to give you 5% at the end of the year, January 2026, we should be able to give you 5%. What happens is, because we were true to our words, you'll be like, oh, I know, I like these guys, I've used them before, I'll use them again. What we've seen at Borderless so far with the collectives that we work with, when people are getting returns, they're just reinvesting. But like, if they're not getting returns, what happens is they just want to pull the money out because they don't trust you. And that's where that's where the rebuilding of the trust starts. And when people are reinvesting, again, money's going back to the continent and there's productivity. We need to increase how much capital goes to Africa, and we need to invest. We need to diversify. There's so many opportunities, and what we want to do at Borderless is put these opportunities in front of anyone, anywhere. We're starting with the African diaspora because we understand the diaspora, they understand us. But when people start seeing returns and talk about it, now Africa will become very investable, not just for Africans, but anywhere, because or anyone. Everybody wants returns. Like, let's not sugarcoat it. Like, money goes where returns are. And then we'll see everyone coming to invest in Africa. And that's the end goal. So many opportunities, infrastructure. I've been seeing private credit deals. Private credit is crazy. Private credit works in Africa because the interest rates are so high. And if you know what you're doing, like I think interest rates in Nigeria are in the mid-20s, and interest rates in the West, like I think the ECB, the European Central Bank, just dropped the interest rates. Again, I think it's like 2 or 3%. So if you can actually have access to capital at 2 or 3% and lend it in the mid-20s, now you have this huge margin that you're working with. So private credit is becoming more and more popular on the continent. I haven't done anything in the space, but I'm seeing opportunities. And what we want to do is we want to bring these opportunities to the diaspora through Borderless so that they can invest in things that can generate them returns.
Okay. Yep. So we've talked a lot about what the private sector can do. And I think we can just wrap up with what policies are necessary to encourage more diaspora investing. So I was reading up earlier, Nigeria first tried a diaspora bond in 2017, and that raised over 300 million. And last year it did the same thing, and I think that was about $2 billion. So what kind of policies should African governments, African policymakers be looking at to encourage more and more investments from the diaspora?
So we need a lot of good policies. Policies that enable folks to have access to these opportunities regardless of where they are. We need to also lower the barrier to entry for the average person. Now that's the work that we're doing on Borderless, but I think these are policies that can enable anyone anywhere to invest in Africa. So those two policies, we also need to figure out how to keep our FX stable. When there's stability, people can plan. But when the FX is moving up and down, then you struggle to invest because you don't know what's going to happen overnight. Now, I feel like Nigeria has actually gone through like the hardest part in 2023 and 2024 when the Naira went from, 400 to like 1,600. I think it's gone to like 17, 18 and then came back. Stability breeds growth. So we need to put in, our governments need to put in policies that will make sure that just keep the FX stable. Some countries are doing it, I won't mention them, but again, there could be some manipulation there. So let's keep the currency stable without manipulating too much. You need it to flow. When you look at USD GBP or USD Euro, while it fluctuates within a range, and when it goes past a certain range, there is people start crying. When you have that stability, then people can do business. People know that, hey, if I send my goods from China to Nigeria and that takes 90 days, the price I paid there won't change too much. And that's where stability really, really breeds growth. So we need to put in very good policies that can really, really help us or help our economy stay stable. And yeah, more and more people will invest. If I was to do one thing, it's just keep the FX stable. Keep it, if we can. And I know that the Nigerian Central Bank is doing a lot of work. I'm sure you've seen, again, the Naira has been fairly stable. We need to keep that going for a very long time. And if it stays at 1,600, then so be it. Keep it, leave it there. So be it. We can do a lot more business when there's stability, and I think that a lot of African governments need to pay attention to that.
Awesome, thank you. Stability is super important. Thank you so much.